So we've officially come to the end of the F1 2020 silly season, and because I'm an opinionated northerner, I thought it'd be fun to rank the racetracks we went to this year. Jumping on the bandwagon of a tier list, I'm going to be ranking the circuits from A to E. Also, quick shout out to Tomo F1 who did this prior to the shortened season being announced. Make sure you go check out his video. So the first circuit we go to is the Red Bull Ring, where two of this year's races were held. I think a lot of you would agree that the track at Spielberg produces really exciting racing. You've got the long straights and the fast run of the circuit, meaning there's always action happening around the track. Plus, it's one of the most picturesque circuits in the calendar, which definitely adds something to the race, at least visually, compared to the likes of Barcelona and Sochi. I'm going to give the Red Bull Ring a solid B. I've seen the Hungaroring cause a bit of a debate as to how memorable a track it is, and for me, I've got to say, it's pretty average. I think this year's results were almost indicative of how uninspiring the Hungaroring is, with a Mercedes 1-3 and Max Verstappen splitting the silver arrows. I think in the case of the Hungarian Grand Prix, the results can partly be explained by the track. See, the Hungaroring almost wants to be a street circuit without actually being on the streets. It doesn't really allow for racing, especially the hairpins at the end of the lap before the main straight. But I think there are much worse circuits out there, so I'm giving the Hungaroring a D. Okay, moving on to something more positive, we are heading to Silverstone. Now, I know because I'm British, I might be slightly biased, but I really believe Silverstone is one of the best tracks on the calendar. You've got Copse, Maggots, Beckett and Chapel to finish off with the Hanger Straight. There's also the fact it's an old airfield, meaning it's exposed to the elements, particularly gusts of wind. At this year's British GP, it was amazing the three-wheel finish by Hamilton. I don't think it's a surprise that I'm going to give Silverstone an A. I'm going to be straight with you on this one. I don't like Circuit de Catalunya. It just doesn't produce exciting races. I think it might help if it was an F1's testing venue, because the teams have every piece of data possible for the circuit, which means that prior to the race, they have exploited every possible eventuality and have a solution for it. To be fair, I haven't been to this track and I hear it offers a fairly decent fan experience, so I'm going to give it a D. Spa is a track I would love to visit. It's in the beautiful Belgian countryside and it brings with it an amazing fan experience. The circuit itself is also a thing of beauty, namely the downhill of Eau Rouge before the extreme elevation of Rodillion, and the fast layout of the track makes it normally an exciting race. But you might have picked up on how I said normally. Well, that's because this year's race was just a bit underwhelming. No one particularly felt like they were driving to the limit, and Hamilton completely dominated the race. However, if we base every circuit on races being less entertaining because of Mercedes' domination, most tracks would be in the bottom tier. So I'm going to be fair and give Spa an A. So this next rating is going to be down to my personal preference, because some of you may agree and others may disagree, but after Silverstone, Monza is probably my second favourite track. Every time I see a car coming up the Ascari and Parabolica, my heart does a little flip because this track is fast. Despite it being a historical track, it's just so unpredictable. You have close racing between cars and drivers pushing themselves and their cars as much as possible. You also can't forget the absolutely incredible Italian fans. Monza for me gets an A. While COVID stopped us going to special tracks like Interlagos and Suzuka, we got to see a Formula 1 race on a new track. Situated in stunning Tuscany, Mugello is a rollercoaster ride with its valley dips and sweeping turns. It was again a Mercedes podium lockout, but despite this, I really enjoyed watching it, especially qualifying. It doesn't quite match Monza for me, but I'd give Mugello a B. We haven't had an E yet, but that's all about to change with Sochi. Now, I'm not a fan of knocking things down, and I appreciate that Sochi has brought F1 to Russia. But after watching the Grand Prix this year, my opinion can't be changed. It's really hard to have any real racing on this track. I mean, granted, we saw Lando Norris, Alex Albon and George Russell fighting it out, but they were battling for 16th place. Also, the layout of this track really needs to be looked at. Turn 2, 7 and 18 don't add a challenge, they're just problematic, especially Turn 2, which Carlos Sainz and Romain Grosjean proved were extremely difficult to manoeuvre. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, so tell me what you think about Sochi down in the comments. We move on to the Nurburgring in Germany, which returned to this year's F1 calendar. A lot of people were really excited for this race, and I think this is down to the fact it was Mark Webber's debut win. I really enjoyed the flowing nature of the track with the natural elevation changes, and it definitely added something new to the calendar. For me, it doesn't quite deserve a place permanently on the F1 calendar, but I think looking at the rankings on the tier list at the minute, I'm going to give it a B. But if there's one track from this year's calendar that I would like to see return in 2021, it's Portimão. The circuit situated on the Algarve was a favourite of mine throughout the race weekend. The track has incredible elevation, with one highlight being the downhill into turn 1 before a sudden uphill before turn 2. I think the challenging nature of the track did help provide some good midfield action. My only criticism was that on race day, the DRS in the final straight was too long and should be shortened if we return. People that I know were there said it's a great spectator venue and the grandstands provide an excellent view of the track. Portimão is getting an A. An old favourite that made a reappearance on the calendar was Imola. There's no doubt in saying it's a beautiful track to watch the cars take on. I enjoyed qualifying, but for some reason, Imola just didn't click with me on race day. Part of that reason, I think, is the fact that the course is difficult for Formula 1 cars to pass each other. Positively, this did mean strategy was needed in order to make your way through the pack, either through undercuts or overcuts. On the tier list, I'm going to give Imola a B. This year really was a blast from the past as we returned to Istanbul Park. Going into the weekend, I felt like there was a lot of hype around the circuit, but this was ultimately destroyed upon the discovery that the track surface was a bit of a mess. However, if you look past this, Turkey for me was a good race. Turn 8 is just out of this world with its 4 apex corners that are at full speed, and again the elevation coupled with blind bends was phenomenal to watch. I think it's fair to give Turkey a B. I'm always surprised by how much love Bahrain gets from commentators. To me, Bahrain is just an okay track. Positively, there are some good overtaking opportunities and battles in the midfield, and it's always nice to have a race under the lights. But Bahrain to me is just, it gets a C. Bahrain's outer circuit wasn't half as bad as I expected it to be. Despite producing extremely short laps, it felt like the race was almost an endurance test. I also enjoyed the outer track's DRS opportunities and the fact that everyone was bunched up together. Whether I would want to see the outer circuit as a permanent feature on the calendar, I'm not sure, but this year I'm giving it a B. We finished with one of the most controversial tracks on the list, the Yas Marina circuit. Now, during the finale race, my Twitter feed was filled with people saying how they fell asleep, how it was the most boring race of the year, etc. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Yas Marina is a good circuit, and it definitely isn't fan-worthy of being the last fixture on the calendar. But I think with a few tweaks it could be improved. For example, I'm not a huge fan of the chicanes between turn 5 and 6. I think if you opened up the hairpin by removing 5 and 6 before the long straight, there would be further opportunity for overtaking. The chicane at 11, 12 and 13 also needs to be reviewed. For me, in its present state, Yas Marina can't be rated any higher than a D. Do you agree with my rankings, or are there some that you're completely baffled by? Let me know in the comments. Also, make sure you subscribe for the latest videos on this channel. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, so it would be greatly appreciated if you give me a follow on those channels. Otherwise, I'll see you again very soon.